The AFC North is going to be one of the toughest divisions in the NFL this year. You have the Ravens, the Bengals, who pretty much are Super Bowl contenders, and then you got the Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are good enough to be playoff teams. And with this division being so talented, who's going to come in last place? Now, there are a good amount of people out there, including Vegas, who think that the Steelers are going to finish in last place. And here's the thing about Pittsburgh finishing in last place, right? Even though they may not have the most talented roster in this division, this roster isn't bad. This is a really talented roster. As a matter of fact, some may argue that this is the most talented team that Mike Tomlin has had in Pittsburgh and over the last 3 to 4 years. You look at the Cleveland Browns, they have one of the better rosters, not just in this division, but in the whole entire NFL. Really good offensive line. You're pretty much expecting Deshaun Watson to bounce back. Your secondary should be really good. But how improved is your run defense going to be is the biggest question for Cleveland. Baltimore, as long as Lamar Jackson can stay healthy, I think they're going to be pretty competitive. And you got Cincinnati up there, who won this division last season. But when it comes to picking who's going to finish in last place in the AFC North, do you really think that team's going to be the Steelers, who has Mike Tomlin still as their head coach, who's yet to have a losing season, despite having several years in the NFL where there were some expectations that Pittsburgh could have their first losing seasons? How many times over the last 4 years has Pittsburgh been picked to be the worst team in this division? Are you really that confident that the Steelers are going to be finishing in last place this year? Do you not trust Mike Tomlin? Do you not think that Kenny Pickett is going to improve in year 2 after the glimpses that he had of brilliance, especially in the fourth quarter of games with all of the fourth quarter comebacks that he led Pittsburgh to? You look at the Cleveland Browns, they have a history of being dysfunctional. And how much do you trust Kevin Stefanski? Do you trust Kevin Stefanski more than you trust Mike Tomlin? What has Kevin Stefanski shown you over the last couple of years that gives you confidence that the Cleveland Browns are going to finish above Pittsburgh if you think that Pittsburgh is going to finish in last place? And I think that the last time the Steelers finished below the Browns in this division was like decades ago. There's a level of consistency that you get out of the Pittsburgh Steelers that you don't get out of the Cleveland Browns. And yes, you can have concerns and questions about Kenny Pickett, but outside of him, this is a really good roster. And Kenny Pickett, the stats don't show how much improvement he made over the course of his rookie season. I'm looking at the Cleveland Browns. What was their biggest struggle last year? Their inability to stop the run. And they're in a division where the other 3 teams that they face off against twice this season all are really good running the football. Pittsburgh can run the football with Najee Harris. The Baltimore Ravens have Lamar Jackson and an incredible group of running backs. Cincinnati has Joe Mixon and an improved offensive line. And if you can't stop the run in this division, how much success can you possibly have? Some of the best rushing teams in the NFL reside in the AFC North. When you look at the Cleveland Browns, can you really say that you have faith that they're going to be able to live up to the level of talent that they have on their roster after years of disappointing performances, after years of not being that great? And then they get Deshaun Watson, that just changes everything? You know, what about the Ravens, though? If they have an injury or two to Lamar Jackson, OBJ, where would they lie in this division? You know, like, I don't think that Pittsburgh is just going to be locked in to be the worst team in this division. You got consistency with Mike Tomlin being your head coach. You know that with Mike Tomlin being your head man, you're at least going to have 9 wins. 9-8 in any other division probably would be a second place finish. Maybe 9-8 gets you last in the AFC North, but is it really that bad? Who's more likely to have a losing record, the Cleveland Browns or the Pittsburgh Steelers? I probably would go with the Cleveland Browns. I don't really trust Kevin Stefanski. This is an organization that has a consistent history of not being able to perform up to expectation. And although they have a really talented roster, talent doesn't automatically win you games. You got to have the coaching and you got to have the proper infrastructure in place. I'm looking at Pittsburgh. You got stability with Mike Tomlin. You got a great defense. You got the ability to run the football. And you have a promising young quarterback in Kenny Pickett. Like I said, stop looking at statistics from last year. You got to stop judging players based on the box score and judge players based on what the film tells you. And what the film shows about Kenny Pickett is that he may not have had impressive starts to the game, but as we already know, the old-fashioned mantra is not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And how did Kenny Pickett finish against the Las Vegas Raiders? He led them to a comeback from behind victory. And what many people fail to say about Pittsburgh is that if Kenny Pickett would have started week 1 last season, they probably would have made it to the postseason. You remember that game against the Carolina Panthers when the Steelers didn't have Kenny Pickett? He was out with a concussion, and Mitch Trubisky came in, and the Steelers were moving the ball downfield, but Kenny Pickett had too many red zone interceptions. You see, it's easy to look at Pittsburgh and circle this as being the worst team to finish in the AFC North this year. But I think that that's just too easy of an answer. I don't think that enough people are really considering the problems that the Cleveland Browns have. The Steelers improved their offensive line. They're calling this the picket fence. You have Kenny Pickett, who has shown a lot of promise over the course of this offseason, and you have a stable, functional organization. The Browns are still dysfunctional. They still have concerns when it comes to the interior of their defensive line. They got a really good offensive line. Their receiving core, although unproven, is really talented. But I probably would pick them to finish last in the AFC North before I picked the Pittsburgh Steelers. And before you call me biased, I didn't pick Pittsburgh to make it to the playoffs last year or even the year before. And I think that most people will agree that I go about this channel in the most unbiased way possible. If I thought that Pittsburgh was going to finish last in this division, I promise you I would have no problem saying it. I'm somebody who, yes, I am a fan of the Steelers, but I don't let my fandom cloud my expectations for the season. I keep it real, and I keep it unbiased. And I'm looking at the Cleveland Browns. I don't really know if Deshaun Watson is a great fit in Kevin Stefanski's system. And I don't even know if their run defense is going to be all that improved, even though they did bring in Jim Schwartz, and they paid a lot of money in free agency to Dalvin Tomlinson. You also brought in Maurice Hurst. But I still don't know if that's enough to completely revamp that run defense. And their linebacking core isn't good outside of JOK. I'm not a big believer in the Cleveland Browns. And I know that you can't define a team based on their history. But you can define a team based on what they've done recently over the last couple of years. And what has Cleveland done over the last couple of years outside of making it to the postseason that 1 year? They haven't really done anything. Last year, people thought this was going to be a team that could be a playoff contender. And what did they do? They disappointed. Although Deshaun Watson was suspended, when he came back, he wasn't anything to write home about. He was really rusty. And I do think that people have to right to be skeptical of Deshaun Watson being able to bounce back. We don't even know if Deshaun Watson is going to be the same player that he was with the Houston Texans. They paid him all this money just for him to go out and perform how he did last season. You can't use, like he was a little rusty. Like, you started him over Jacoby Brissett. Some may argue that Jacoby Brissett would have given the Browns a better chance at making it to the postseason last year than Deshaun Watson, who obviously was showing signs of field rust with his performance. He was struggling to read defenses. He was struggling with accuracy. He didn't look anywhere close to the player that he was playing for the Houston Texans. I have more confidence in Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers this year than I do Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns. You see, coaching matters in the NFL. The teams that have good rosters with good coaching normally are the teams that have the most success versus teams that have good rosters but decent coaching. Remember the Dallas Cowboys all those years when they were going 8-8 with the master clapper that is Jason Garrett? I think the Cleveland Browns kind of are in that same category with Kevin Stefanski. I don't think he's a bad coach, but in a division like the AFC North, where you have great quarterbacks and great head coaches, I think the Cleveland Browns are the odd man out. They got a pretty good team, but they don't have a pretty good coach. You can blame Baker Mayfield all you want to for the Cleveland Browns not being able to get it done before they had Deshaun. But this was the same team that went to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield when everybody was on the Baker Mayfield hype train. And it's crazy how things have just shifted since then. And now, once again, we're back hyping up the Cleveland Browns and trying to downplay the Pittsburgh Steelers like Mike Tomlin hasn't been able to overachieve over the last 3-4 years. You see, what's funny about the people who doubt Pittsburgh is that they talk about, oh, this team isn't great. Mike Tomlin's going to have his first losing season. But once Pittsburgh ends up overexceeding expectations like they have done over the last 3-4 years, nobody's ever there to be found. It's always praise for Mike Tomlin, but nobody actually comes out and admits when they were wrong about Pittsburgh. It's easy to pick Pittsburgh to finish last in this division because the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Browns, they're more flashy. Pittsburgh doesn't really have a lot of flash. Outside of George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, there aren't a lot of players that really are going to wow you. You got players who are consistent, who come in and get the job done. And Pittsburgh has one of the most talented defenses in the whole entire NFL. You got TJ Watt. You saw how different this team performed when TJ Watt came back and he was fully healthy. You got Alex Highsmith, who's coming off a career-high 14 sacks. Cleveland, they struggled with their pass rush last year. Yes, they did trade for Zadarius Smith, but is Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett a better pass rushing duo than Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt? What about the Ravens? I mean, they lack pass rush. The only team in this division that really doesn't have too many concerns are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Outside of Kenny Pickett, what else is the biggest concern coming out of Pittsburgh? The cornerback position has improved. You look at what they have at linebacker now. Your defensive line is still amongst the best in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Ravens have concerns with their pass rush. You don't really know if everything's going to work out with this offense, even though I do have belief in it. But a lot of people don't know how Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken are going to work. The Cincinnati Bengals, they are a team that historically gets off to a slow start with Joe Burrow at the helm at QB. And if they get into a slow start this season, you wonder if that kind of could hold them back in this division. I'm not saying the Pittsburgh Steelers can't finish in last place this year, but I am saying that I probably would bet money that Pittsburgh finishes in third place or higher. I don't know who's going to finish in last in the AFC North, but I definitely feel it's not going to be Pittsburgh. I probably would put my money on the Browns finishing in last place in the division. I don't know if Kevin Stefanski is as good as a head coach as Zach Taylor, Mike Tomlin, or even John Harbaugh. I don't even know if Deshaun Watson is a great fit in his system. And we don't even know if Deshaun is even remotely the same player now that he was a couple of years ago before all the off-the-field incidents. Who will finish last in the AFC North? My guess probably are the Cleveland Browns.